on the News Channel 5 network. This is Inside Politics.
Hello, everyone. I'm News Channel 5's political analyst, Pat Nolan. Welcome to Inside Politics. In the wake of what happened last weekend with the violence and death in Charlottesville, Virginia, this country's had another difficult week dealing with race relations, along with the role of American history of the Civil War and the rise of the KKK, white nationalist, and neo-Nazi movements to prominence again in America. To help us bring some perspective and insight to these issues, we welcome Nashville historian Bill Carey and State Representative Harold Love Jr. to Inside Politics. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for being here.
Let me get both of your reflections briefly about this past week. We certainly seem to have seen this time again where the divisions in this country have been pretty much laid bare. Do you agree, Representative Love?
Yes, sir, absolutely. I think that what happened in Charlottesville reopened a wound that really was never closed well. And that's the issue of race relations in this country. We talk about the issue of slavery, we sometimes gloss over it, and we hope to move to what's called a post-racial society.
Bill, we're sort of still refighting the Civil War in a lot of ways, aren't they?
I'm not sure if I would characterize it as that, but going back to the reaction, I had trouble the first night sleeping because of what happened, and then I had trouble 2 nights later sleeping, and probably even more so, strangely enough, the 2 nights later, the second time the president reacted. I don't know why that bothered me more than it did.
So has this past week, as this has continued to evolve, left you feeling sad? Do you see it getting worse? We have more of these rallies likely to come, or do you have some reason for optimism that we're going to come back together as a country?
Well, my concern is that it's potentially going to be happening on college campuses, right? So you have a place where young people are going to learn and to get the skills they need to go into careers and be good members of our society. But it seems as if certain groups are now targeting our college campuses to make their statements. And so I wonder how that will affect their learning environment.
Bill, what are your thoughts?
I don't know. There at least has been in the last 2 days a lot of universal condemnation that wasn't there the first 2 days. These things like the companies that are disavowed, like Google and Uber, and what are some of the other companies? The GoDaddy, which have unplugged and ended their business relationships with a lot of these organizations. That's an unprecedented step. I don't know if anything like that's ever happened since the internet was invented. So perhaps this reveals, and also the documentary that came out tonight, I guess it was last night, that showed in great detail what some of these guys were saying, what they were doing in the streets.
You mentioned the internet. You know, today we're all so wired together. We get information more quickly than ever before. But, Representative Love, we sort of get it in our own cocoon. If we're on Facebook or we're on Twitter, we follow our own people. We have our, and so sometimes that sort of creates, perhaps for some people, their measure of reality, and other people may have totally different measures of reality. How is social media, do you think, impacting both what happened and now how people are responding to it?
Well, certainly I think the internet, social media does a great deal to shape the mindset of persons. The unfortunate part is that we don't oftentimes use it to learn from another one's perspective, right? I think we would have a much better society if people were to at least consider someone else's perspective, right? And try to understand where the person is coming from. Even someone whose views you don't agree with.
But if that doesn't show up on your Facebook feed, you never see it.
Absolutely right, which means that when you have young people and even some older persons who are surrounded by persons of the same mindset who are perpetuating this fear and racism and neo-Nazism and white supremacy, what it then causes is for them to think that that is a good reality.
Bill, historians usually take a longer view of things, therefore they sort of let things simmer in for a while. Social media 24/7, 365 does not really lend itself to that.
No, it doesn't. You know, sort of unrelated, I saw yesterday, and it was on Facebook, the broadcast of Walter Cronkite, the last time we had a total eclipse. I watched the whole thing, and even though I didn't mean to, I caught myself feeling sentimental about a time when we all kind of watched the same news, and no one was making commentary. There was something about there was no reason for it to be something that became antagonistic. It was just kind of, this is what happened today here and there. And I realized we don't have that anymore in this country, at least maybe not. We certainly don't on a lot of the cable networks.
Well, there's been a feeling in recent years that we've made quite a bit of progress in racial relations and other things in terms of dealing with bigotry. and fascism. I think this week has probably told us that maybe we haven't gone as far as we thought. How did we get it wrong? And did we fool ourselves into that?
Well, I think that over the years we have ignored the signs that we have not dealt properly with it. And I make reference to the fact that when we go through the civil rights struggle, we see that the federal government makes efforts to level the playing field, but we did not get to the root of why some people were still insisting on having white-only restrooms, white-only hotels. And then we talk about the fact that we have an administration who seems to not really push the agenda to say we're going to reconcile and we're going to push past this. And I would also make note of this. In the administration of President Obama, we saw several instances where things were done to him that might not have been done to any other president. I speak very clearly about the fact that while he was giving his State of the Union address, a member of Congress calls him a liar in the middle of the speech. Now, this is just blatant disregard for the president.
Bill, normally in a situation like this, historically, the president, whoever that is, sort of becomes the person who tries to bring everybody together, a unifying force. That's not what we're seeing this time. How much more difficult is it going to make for the country to come back together when you don't have the leader of the country being part of leading that? In fact, if anything, he's right in the middle, sort of being one of the people that's keeping it stirred up, into a lot of people think.
I don't know. Is it possible that by saying what he said, he has unified us more than he realized because so many people didn't think he reacted in the right way? I don't know. It feels like we're kind of on uncharted waters, but it's felt a lot. It's not the first time in the last few months that I've felt that way. I found myself wondering. My grandfather was a colonel in World War II and was in Germany, and I caught myself wondering, what would he think if he was still alive? You know, we called them Nazis. We called them, you know, we don't call them alt-right or whatever the heck that is. So I'm sure there's a lot of complex reactions to from a lot of people, a lot of different generations.
Bill Carey, Nashville historian, is our guest, along with State Representative Harold Love Jr. We're talking about the events of the past week coming out of the Charlottesville incident and the violence and the tragedy there. Back to continue our conversation with these two gentlemen after you watch these messages.